it's Tara.
It's Jen.
It's Steve Webster.
And Steve Webster. And we are here with another episode of Girlfriends Talk Marketing. And as Steve said, we are here. He is our lovely guest today, and we are at the Cottage Park Yacht Club in Winthrop, and the sun is finally shining, and we have a great topic for you today to talk about. And Jen's going to introduce our guest.
Steve is the owner-founder of Wellfleet Enterprises. He is a CEO coach, CEO advisor, and business coach. Let me get that right. He works with companies that are ready to grow and take it to the next level. So, Steve, as you're working with your CEOs, what is the biggest marketing challenge that you find they have?
I think the biggest challenge that they have right now is trying to make sense of all of the technologies and the options that they have to take advantage and to talk, to really reach out to their customers and to their prospects. All of these tools are moving and evolving so very quickly. So for many of these companies who have been traditional marketers, doing legacy sort of marketing, pivoting their marketing messages into an online type of a model and really being able to leverage a lot of the assets and the technologies that they have from those, I think that's really becoming an extremely challenging time for them to advance that.
Do you find that they're reluctant to use the new technology and all of the tools that they've got?
I find that whenever people have to move from a I just do to a learn do type of a mode, that the learn do mode just takes a lot of time. So they're challenged really to move from what they historically had done and kind of done from a routinized perspective. I send out a direct mail campaign, I do this, I do that. Well, they've been doing it for years and it really didn't fundamentally change. Now, every single time they interact with a tool, for example, even if they're used to the tool, it's been updated, it's been upgraded. Here's the latest version of it. So there's this ongoing kind of challenge, which is what I did last week might actually change again this week because of some configuration or some other challenge to the technology. So I think our entire society is moving into this much faster paced type of learn-do mode. And I don't think most people are fundamentally that comfortable with it yet. So I think over time, as we begin to work more and more with these technologies and they become easier and easier to use, I think a lot of these companies will be able to get greater leverage out of it and greater yield from their investments. But in the current state of that transition, I think it's very difficult for them to do it.
Right. Yeah, and as you mentioned, there's just new things are constantly changing all the time. So just when you think that you have a solution in place that you're finally comfortable with working on, the dashboard gets updated or like a whole new learning curve. And so in addition to running the business, you've now got to become essentially experts in 10 different technologies just to operate your business at the same level that it was before.
Yeah, and some of the legal and the laws are changing too, right? If you're an international company, you have to deal with GDPR, which is something that you were aware of before, and there were some, but I'm speaking to a friend of mine the other day who's actually trying to make sense of the GDPR rules. It's not like they're clear cut. It's not like you can say, well, it's absolutely this or it's absolutely that. And then as you begin to look at what happened with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica and some of these other personal information challenges that they have, all businesses have to figure out a way to get smart about those things. And they're complicated. So whether or not you have those assets on staff where they can, spend 20, 30, 40% of their time trying
just
to now
managing a database.
Managing a database or what tools they need to apply, or even being able to interpret what the law is. Am I in compliance? Am I not in compliance? I think that all of these things just add layers and layers and layers of complexity, when at the end of the day, they're just trying to satisfy their existing customers and find new
sell
ones.
New stuff.
They're trying to sell new stuff.
Sell more services, make your customers happy.
And they're, and the expectation of what a relationship is, right, is as a consumer, the type of relationship you want to have with every company that you deal with, and they're trying to make that happen with you. So how do you do it if you're spending all of your time doing these other things? It's not like you have an endless source of resources or talent to do it all.
And it's the same 24 hours in the day
that
everyone's all had. So how do you slice that pie up differently than you have in years past? So.
Yeah, and that's really what I see happening is just this ongoing learning and doing and changing and evolution. And for all of the things that they talk about that are getting simpler, it would appear as if most things are getting more complex and not simpler, even though this technology was supposed to make everything simpler
easier.
for us. Yeah, it really is a remarkable Remarkable
It's
challenge.
quite, yeah, it's quite the, what is it, dichotomy that is back and forth of it.
Absolutely.
Cool. So with all of these opportunities and decisions and choices, like where do you have CEOs start? Like how do you say, okay, start here and then get to point A to point B?
Yeah, the conversation really begins with where are they?
Mm-hmm.
Where are they today? Where are you starting from? So if you're coming out of traditional marketing and you're just beginning your journey into digital marketing, then there's a different phase there that you're beginning with. If you're moving, if you started to use a marketing automation platform, or you've tried to connect it up to your CRM system, or do all of those things that sound really easy, right?
Right.
Oh yeah, I love the term plug and play.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's the most overused term in technology, but it is one that I've never seen anything ever plug and play. But we talk about it as if it's going to.
Yeah.
So many times it's just a matter, if they're just starting their digital journey, it's how do they get the messages, how do they understand the tools, what are the things that they can do, how do they actually tweak the configuration, whether it be on your email on the back end of it, right? How often do you want to send that out? Do you want to send out a reminder?
Right.
All of those types of little adjustments that you could make to this core standard package is a good place to kind of start to get more value from the tools that you're working on. And then after that, it's at what level of segmentation do I move to? How do I start to look at my database differently?
Right.
What are the, am I looking at it from a total number of orders perspective? Am I looking at it from a revenue perspective? What are the ways that I'm beginning to now slice and dice my audiences so that I can have the right dialogue with them? And then eventually, how do you get more into a personalized type of an approach?
Right.
So when I'm talking to Jennifer as a business, I'm talking directly to Jennifer
Right.
because that's your expectation.
Right.
Your expectation. The Amazons of the world and all these other companies that we interact with every single day have raised the bar.
Right.
They've raised the bar for all small businesses. So when a small business doesn't, it's not that they're supposed to be like Amazon, but when a small business doesn't create the same experience that Amazon does, you get disappointed by it.
Right.
And in a world where every customer is absolutely critical to your success, disappointing those customers, since it's like a click away from going somewhere else, you really
It's
have
a fine
to.
line,
It's a fine line. Many years ago, old school, they'd pick up the phone and call and say, "Jen, I'm so sorry," right? They would do something that way.
Right.
Where today, you're a click away from being yesterday's news. So.
There's so many things that you can do as a small business owner, and a lot of businesses try to do it all themselves, but eventually they're going to reach a point where they can't. So when do you start to think about outsourcing some of these things, and how do you go about figuring out what makes sense and what you should be doing internally versus what you might want to hire somebody for?
Sure. I mean, and so much of that is centered around, like, what do you need? What are your needs? So from a position description, right, they've done a good job over the years of saying, okay, I need this particular person to do this particular thing.
Okay.
And then what you need to do is essentially define what those roles are and define what is the role that you have.
Right.
Do I have people on staff that could do that job? Do I have people on staff who could do it today, or do I need to train them to do it?
Right.
So if I need to train them to do it, that's a different decision.
Right.
Versus then saying the next step, which is I have this opportunity to say, can I bring in someone from the outside who can plug in, either with industry experience or with specific skill experience to help move you to those. So there's a number of different portals that you can get into, right, for tasky type of things to find those resources. But generally what you want to do is you want to talk to people who are trusted advisors, who could have a dialogue with you, who've done some of the vetting if you don't have that skill on your staff, so that they can refer them to you, and you can kind of strip out some of the noise around getting somebody inbound for you.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's a hard journey for many small businesses.
Finding the right person and the fit and
for small and because culture at most of these small businesses, right, they're built around the owner's culture, right? And many of them are so extremely positive. And when you go down the hiring of an employee perspective, right, you want to make sure that they fit that culture.
Yeah.
You need to take those same things into consideration when it comes to hiring an outsourced capability, an outsourced talent, or else it'll be highly disruptive.
Yep. Agreed.
The other thing that you really need to think through is to be transparent with your employees that it's not a threat. It's not a threat to them that you're actually bringing in somebody else. You're not bringing in someone to replace them. You're bringing in someone who is actually just going to complement them or augment their skills with skills that they might not have. But especially in businesses where people have been in the business for a long time, and job security is absolutely a critical thing for them, you have to be really extremely cautious around making sure that you are as transparent as possible as you embark on your new journey.
Yeah, so you don't grow at like awkward points where there's staff that's like, where are all these people coming from? You never want to have that kind of like awkward divide in an organization.
Yeah, you don't want to instill any fear that just because they don't have that, they're already talented and skilled in what they do, but they may not have all of the talents and skills that are necessary to do what's required.
Right.
And as a small business, you have to place your bets on your investments in certain areas. So these are areas where you might be able to flex it and get greater ROI from those investments rather than bringing them on board. But for the people who've been in the business for a long time, it is a transitional time for them to think about it.
But that's a good point. If you need to understand the culture of your workplace, and so that when you're bringing in this outsourced person, it's going to fit within that culture, so everybody can work well together.
Because at the end of the day, it's team, and all teams go through that learning journey, right? I always use the term: they form, they storm, they norm, and they perform. Right?
That's good.
Which is an interesting, and you think about
but it's so true.
Whenever you add someone new, right?
Yeah.
When you guys work together, so you know each other, so you've been through those phases.
Yeah.
But whenever you add someone new to the mix, it actually brings the team back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Because now everybody's, because you're kind of reforming, right? Because ultimately we'll work really well together once we get over the trust barrier. Right? If you trust me, then it's going to be extremely easy for us to grow our relationship, to make sure we're doing the right things together.
Right.
Finding that trust is where the journey, it either succeeds or fails. Right.
Yeah.
And not every single journey is going to end in success. So you just need to be open to that and recognize that could happen.
Yeah. No, that's such great advice. So good. Cool. So what are you working on?
Well, as of right now, I'm actually working on a number of different clients. One of the clients that I'm working with is in the artificial intelligence space, which is
very hot.
Kind of really a very hot space. It's a giant wave.
Yeah.
It's sort of it's probably what marketing technology looked like 6 or 7 years ago, when there was maybe 100 companies doing it, and now there's 6,000 companies doing it. So I'm spending a lot of time really trying to learn, because we have a very interesting time around kind of societal changes that are about to happen and governmental changes that are about to happen, because the technology is actually changing faster now than humans' capacity to absorb it and to handle it. So I'm spending a lot of time right now really trying to understand what's going on in that particular space, and to try to think through how folks can begin to use some of these tools so that they can really stay up with all of the other companies that are going to be able to afford and bring these tools and talent on. So what you have is a lot of like larger size businesses that say, I need to go hire data scientists, thinking that a data scientist is going to be an answer to their question. And it certainly is an important part of it, but data scientists alone will be in very sparse supply for all of the companies who are going to need it. So what you're going to see in these technologies as well is you're going to see another layer of technology that begins to get introduced into businesses around how does AI become democratized and available to the many.
To everybody, versus not just to the elite, but to the mass population.
So we're at the very, very beginning outset of that journey right now. It's a remarkable
wave.
That's
so cool, yeah.
Yeah, I like to learn new things. So,
well, that's a good one.
I don't like to get stale. I like to learn new things, and then it gives me more when I'm speaking to my CEOs about the engagements that I have. I can help them with some of those thoughts, because they're going to be challenged by those things.
They're thinking about those same things,
and they're going to ask me about them.
Right.
And they're going to ask me about them. So my goal is to try to stay out ahead of that as best I can.
Wow.
So what's your approach when you come into a company and you're going to become the advisor to the CEO? Can you just give us a quick overview of how you approach that?
Oh, sure. And I mentioned it earlier on with sort of the trust factor. So what I come in is I interview the CEO as much as the CEO interviews me. Right? Because at the end of the day, I need to have the right partner in that role, where he's willing to be transparent with me and I'm willing to be transparent with him. That's where I found it to be the best and most successful engagements, is when you can have that dialogue and build that trust. I had a great recent experience with one CEO, and I sat down and I said, okay, we're going to spend 2 hours together. He said, 2 hours together? I said, yes, we're going to spend 2 hours together. And at the end of the 2 hours, he said to me, I've been in business for 40 years. No one's ever asked me those questions.
Wow.
Right? Because they spend so much time just operating the business that lots of times they're not thinking about where they're going. So asking that hard question, which is, okay, how long do you want to be in this business?
Right.
What is your goal of this business? Do you want to expand it or not? Do you want to sell it or not?
Right.
Do you want to pass it on to your children or not? Do you want to pass it on to your employees?
What's your succession plan?
What's your succession plan? So you have to kind of have that kind of foundational level setting type of discussion. And then what I do is I say, okay, tell me what you think the problems are. And then he or she tells me what they think the problems are. I said, okay, now I'm going to go interview as many of your employees as possible to see if I can confirm or deny those things.
Tricky, I like
because
it.
And I mentioned this to Jennifer a little bit earlier today. I said most of the answers to the business's problems actually reside with the employees.
Oh yeah.
But there are reasons why those employees won't raise their hands, or the reasons why they might not tell you as the CEO what they're thinking.
Correct.
There are just so many organizational norms that take place. I call them cultural norms that you need to bust through in order to make any kind of a transformational change in your business.
Right.
So that's kind of how I do it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, no, such great advice. Thank you, Steve. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time for another episode. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.